I stood at the entrance of the Lakeside Conservatory, the checkbook for the final catering payment burning a hole in my purse. I wasn't greeted with a hug. I was blocked by a wall of white lace. Stephanie didn't even blink. She just held out her hand and said, "Give me the check, Catherine. Then leave." I froze. "Excuse me?" She smiled, cold as ice. "You are not welcome at the wedding. Your widow energy. It ruins the aesthetic. We just need the money. Not you." I looked at my son, Justin. He stared at his shoes. Before we see what happens next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the sudden heat flushing my face. Through the windshield, the conservatory looked like a fragile, glowing jewel box. Glass walls, steel beams, exotic orchids climbing toward the vaulted ceiling. It was architectural perfection. I should know. I spent 3 months vetting the structural integrity before I wrote the check for the deposit. $60,000. I watched them through the glass. Stephanie was laughing, throwing her head back, her hand resting possessively on Justin's arm. Justin was smiling too. A weak, grateful smile. He didn't look like a man who had just watched his mother be evicted from the premises. He looked like a man who was relieved he didn't have to choose. For years, I told myself Justin was just gentle, that he needed a strong partner to balance him out. But sitting there, watching him cater to the woman who had just humiliated me, I finally let myself see the architecture of their relationship. It wasn't balance. It was conditioning. Justin had been trained to view affection as a transaction. Stephanie provided the drama, the highs and lows, the emotional chaos he mistook for passion. And I provided the funding. In his mind, my generosity wasn't love. It was control. And Stephanie's cruelty? To him, that was honesty. That was intimacy. He had learned to mistake being devalued for being loved. He believed that if he just stayed quiet enough, if he just let her have her way, he would be safe. I looked down at the checkbook, still clutched in my hand. It wasn't just the wedding. It was the tuition for the degree he never used. The seed money for the tech startup that never launched. The bailouts for the credit card debt he swore was a mistake. I had been the silent investor in his life for 26 years, assuming that eventually, the investment would mature into respect. But looking at him now, standing in the center of a $60,000 venue I paid for, terrified to meet my gaze, I realized the return on investment was zero. Actually, it was negative. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. Stephanie waved at a caterer, pointing imperiously at a table setting. She looked triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully extracted the resource, the money, while discarding the source, me. She thought I would drive away, cry for a few days, and then quietly mail the check because I was desperate to be included. She thought I was a mother who would do anything to keep the peace. She forgot that I was an architect. I don't just build things. I know exactly how to demolish them. I know which beams are load-bearing. I know that if you remove the foundation, the glass house doesn't just crack. It shatters. I put the car in gear. I didn't look back at the conservatory. I didn't look back at my son. The sadness that had threatened to choke me a moment ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, mathematical clarity. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to the office. It was time to look at the blueprints. I unlocked the glass doors to my firm, the keypad beeping a sharp, rhythmic welcome. The office was empty, bathed in the cool blue light of the server racks. It smelled of ozone and expensive coffee, a scent that usually signaled the start of a workday, but tonight, it signaled the end of an era. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The glow from the street lamps outside was enough. I sat at my desk, the leather chair creaking softly, and woke up my computer. I opened the folder labeled Justin and Stephanie Wedding. It wasn't a celebration plan anymore. It was a list of liabilities. I scrolled through the master spreadsheet I had created 6 months ago. Every vendor, every deposit, every contract. My name was at the top of every single document. Catherine Vance. Client. Not mother of the groom. Client. That was the legal reality Stephanie had ignored in her rush to evict me. She forgot that in the eyes of the law, she wasn't the bride. She was just a guest of the woman paying the bills. I picked up the phone. Tears would be a structural weakness I couldn't afford right now. I dialed the number for the venue coordinator, the same woman who had smiled at me an hour ago while my son looked at the floor. She answered on the second ring, her voice professional and bright. I cut her off. I didn't yell. I used the same tone I used when telling a contractor a foundation was unstable. I told her I was exercising the cancellation clause in our agreement, effective immediately. There was a pause, a moment of confused silence on the other end. She tried to argue, mentioning the non-refundable deposit, the closeness of the date. I told her I didn't care about the deposit. Keep the $10,000. I cared about the access. I told her that as of this moment, no one was authorized to enter the premises under my contract. Not Justin, not Stephanie. If they showed up tomorrow, they were to be treated as trespassers. I heard the typing on the other end, the sound of a calendar being cleared. Confirmed. I hung up and moved to the next line on the spreadsheet. The florist. I had spent hours with her, selecting rare white orchids imported from Thailand because Stephanie said roses were too pedestrian. I called her personal cell. I told her the delivery was canceled. She gasped. She said the flowers were already cut, already arranged. I told her to donate them to a hospital or throw them in the compost. It didn't matter to me. I just needed confirmation that not a single petal would touch the tables at the conservatory. Next was the caterer. Then the lighting team. Then the string quartet. It was a demolition, systematic and efficient. I was tearing down the walls of the fairy tale I had built, brick by expensive brick. With every call, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. For years, I had carried the burden of their happiness, their image, their comfort. I had cushioned every fall and subsidized every dream. But as I canceled the vintage champagne order, I realized I wasn't destroying their wedding. I was simply removing the scaffolding. If their relationship was as strong as they claimed, it should stand on its own without my $60,000 propping it up. I sent the final email to the event planner, formally terminating her services. I clicked send and watched the progress bar fill up and vanish. It was done. The spreadsheet was red. The contracts were void. I closed the laptop. I sat there in the dark, feeling the cold, hard surface of the desk under my hands. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like an architect who had just spotted a fatal flaw in the blueprints and had the courage to scrap the project before it collapsed on top of me. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on a beautiful Saturday morning, but for Justin and Stephanie, it wasn't going to be a wedding day. It was going to be a wake-up call. The next morning, my phone didn't just vibrate, it convulsed. I woke up to a screen cluttered with notifications, a digital landslide of panic and accusation. Stephanie was the first to realize the ecosystem had collapsed. Her text started at 7 o'clock in the morning. Confused at first, the florist just called, "What is going on?" And then rapidly descending into hysteria. "You are so bitter," she wrote at 7:45. "I can't believe you would do this just because you're jealous. You're ruining our love story." Jealous. The word popped up on the screen like a bad joke. Jealous of what? A relationship built on exploitation? A fiancé who couldn't pay his own rent? Then came Justin. His voicemails were a masterclass in missing the point. "Mom, please." His voice cracked on the recording. "Stop being dramatic. Stephanie is crying. Just pay the bills and we can talk about this later. You're embarrassing me. Stop being dramatic." That was the phrase that finally made me laugh. A short, sharp sound in the quiet of my kitchen. For years, I had swallowed that phrase. Every time I asked for a thank you, every time I set a boundary they ignored, I was dramatic. Now, looking at the wreckage of their plans on my phone screen, I realized dramatic was just their code word for inconvenient. I didn't reply. I didn't engage. I brewed my coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen, and sat down to watch the show. They took to social media, of course. Stephanie posted a black square on Instagram with a caption that was a masterpiece of vague booking. Some people are so toxic they would rather burn down a family than see others happy. Heartbroken but standing strong. The comments flooded in from her friends, a chorus of sympathy for the victim she was pretending to be. Cut them off, babe. You don't need that negativity. They had no idea they were cheering for a woman who had just lost her free ride. They thought she was the heroine. They didn't know she was the squatter. Justin posted too, a status update that was less aggressive but infinitely more pathetic. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family hurts you the most. Praying for peace. He was playing the wounded son, the martyr caught in the crossfire. He still believed that if he played the role well enough, the money would turn back on. I sipped my coffee, watching the likes roll in. They were building a fortress of lies, brick by digital brick. They were so convinced of their own narrative that I was the villain, the mean old widow with the purse strings, that they didn't even pause to consider the reality of their situation. They were standing in the middle of a construction site without a hard hat, screaming at the architect, unaware that the roof was already gone. I didn't feel the urge to correct them. I didn't feel the need to post my side of the story. I had something better than a Facebook status. I had the contracts. I had the receipts. And most importantly, I had the silence of a phone that I wasn't answering. Let them scream into the void. The echo chamber was their problem now. I had an appointment to keep. I drove to the downtown business district, the skyline reflecting in the glass facades of the high-rises. Susan's office was on the 40th floor, a sleek, minimalist space that smelled of expensive leather and ruthless efficiency. Susan had been my lawyer for 20 years. She handled my business contracts, my estate planning, and my divorce. She knew where all the bodies were buried because she had helped dig the graves. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing look. "You look calm," she observed, gesturing to the chair opposite her desk. "Usually, clients in your position are vibrating with rage." "I'm past rage," I said, setting my laptop bag on the floor. "I'm in damage control mode. I need to make sure I'm legally covered for the cancellations. I don't want Stephanie trying to sue me for breach of promise or emotional distress." Susan nodded, opening a file on her desk. "We can argue that the verbal contract regarding the wedding was contingent on your continued relationship and goodwill, which they severed. Plus, you're the signatory on everything. Legally, it's your party. You can cancel it if you want." She started reviewing the financial records I had sent over earlier. Bank statements, credit card bills, the venue contract. Her eyes scanned the numbers, sharp and analytical. Suddenly, she stopped, her brow furrowed. "Catherine, what is this transfer?" She turned her monitor toward me. "Venue fees, installment 2, $31,200. Sent on March 15th. I squinted at the screen. "That's the second payment for the conservatory. I authorized that transfer myself." "No," Susan said, her voice tightening. "Look at the routing number. That didn't go to the Lakeside Conservatory's account. It went to an LLC registered in Delaware, Lux Life Ventures." My heart skipped a beat. "What is Lux Life Ventures?" Susan typed furiously for a moment, pulling up corporate registration records. "It was incorporated 6 months ago. The registered agent is Stephanie Miller." The room seemed to tilt. Stephanie. My son's fiancée. She had set up a shell company. She had given me a fake invoice for the venue fee, routed the money to her own account, and then, what? Paid the venue with a different check? "Wait," Susan said, clicking on another file. "Here's the actual invoice from the conservatory for that same date. The amount due was 0. You had already paid the full deposit, this $31,000. It wasn't for the venue at all. It was just a straight transfer to her LLC." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just entitlement. It was theft, grand larceny. Stephanie hadn't just used me for a wedding. She had embezzled over $30,000 from me under the guise of venue fees. Why? I whispered. Susan kept digging. I'm looking at her social media archives, deleted posts. Here, a business plan for a lifestyle brand she was planning to launch. Steph Style. Luxury consulting. She needed seed capital, so she stole it from me, I said, the realization settling like a stone in my gut. She stole my money to fund her vanity project. There's more, Susan said, her voice grim. She handed me a printed sheet. It was a guest list. We subpoenaed the wedding planner's files this morning just to be thorough. Look at the VIP section. I scanned the list. My name wasn't there, but two other names were listed under parents of the bride, Robert and Linda Miller. I thought her parents were dead, I said, my voice trembling. She told us they died in a car crash when she was 18. That's why she needed me to pay for everything. That's why I felt so sorry for her. They're alive, Susan said. They live in Ohio. They're on the flight manifest. They were flown in yesterday, first class, paid for by Lux Life Ventures. I stared at the paper. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was existential. Stephanie had invented a tragedy to manipulate my sympathy and my wallet. She had stolen my money to fly in her real parents, who were going to stand in the receiving line, take the credit, and be honored as the hosts of the wedding I paid for, while I was pushed out the back door. It was a con. A long, elaborate, heartless con. And my son, did he know? Catherine? Susan's voice was soft but urgent. This changes everything. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is criminal fraud. We can go to the police. I looked up at her. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Not yet, I said. The police can wait. First, I need to look them in the eye. Susan hesitated, then nodded slowly. If you confront them, you need leverage. You need to control the environment. They're already panicked. If you show up, they might escalate. I won't be alone, I said. And I won't be going to them. They'll come to me. Tomorrow is the wedding date. They'll show up at my house because they have nowhere else to go. They'll think I'm weak. They'll think they can bully me into writing another check. Make sure you have security, Susan advised. And have this ready. She handed me a thick envelope containing copies of the bank transfers, the shell company registration, and the guest list with her parents' names highlighted. This is your shield and your sword. I took the envelope. It felt heavy in my hands, weighted with the truth of their betrayal. Thank you, Susan. I left her office and drove home. The city was bustling with Friday afternoon energy, people heading to happy hours and dinner dates, oblivious to the fact that my life had just been dismantled. I stopped at a specialized security firm on the way. I hired 2 off-duty officers to stand guard at my house the next morning. It cost a fortune, but I didn't care. I was done being vulnerable. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching the shadows lengthen and retreat. I thought about Stephanie, the girl I had welcomed into my home, the girl who had cried on my shoulder about her dead parents. I had comforted her, I had mothered her, and the whole time, she had been calculating how much she could extract from me. And Justin, my son, he knew. He had to know. You don't accidentally invite dead in-laws to a wedding. He had been complicit in the lie, silent in the fraud. The realization didn't break my heart this time. It calcified it. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. The perfect day for a wedding. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the security guards arrived. Big, silent men in dark suits. I positioned them on either side of the front door, inside the house. At 11 o'clock, the pounding started. Mom, open up, we know you're in there. Justin's voice was desperate, frantic. Catherine, this is insane. You have to fix this, Stephanie screamed. I waited. I let them pound. I let them scream. I watched them through the security camera feed on my phone. They looked disheveled, panicked. Stephanie was still in her white bride hoodie, but her face was twisted with rage. Justin looked pale and sweaty. Finally, when the pounding turned to kicking, I opened the door. They stumbled in, ready to attack, ready to unleash a torrent of abuse. But they stopped dead when they saw the 2 guards flanking me. The silence in the hallway was sudden and absolute. "What is this?" Justin stammered, looking from the guards to me. "Security," I said calmly, "to ensure that my guests behave." "Guests?" Stephanie spat. "We're not guests. This is our wedding day. Do you have any idea what you've done? People are calling us. The venue is locked. The vendors are gone. You have to fix this right now. Write a check. Do something." She advanced on me, her hands curled into claws. One of the guards stepped forward, blocking her path. She recoiled, shock replacing the anger on her face. "I'm not fixing anything," I said. "And I'm not writing any checks. But I do have something for you." I held out the envelope Susan had given me. "What is this?" Justin asked, his voice trembling. "The truth," I said. "Open it." He took it with shaking hands. He pulled out the papers. I watched his eyes scan the first page, the bank transfer to Lux Life Ventures. Then the second, the corporate registration with Stephanie's name. "Lux Life Ventures?" he whispered. Stephanie went white. She snatched the papers from him. "It's nothing. It's just business. She's trying to confuse you." "Keep reading," I said coldly. Justin pulled out the next sheet, the guest list. He stared at it for a long time. "Robert and Linda Miller," he read. He looked up at Stephanie, confusion warring with horror in his eyes. "Your parents? You told me you were an orphan. I. Stephanie stammered, backing away. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." "They're alive," I said, my voice cutting through her lies. "And they're in town. You flew them in first class on my dime. You stole $31,000 from me to fund your vanity business. And you lied about your dead parents to manipulate me into paying for a wedding where they were going to take the credit." Justin looked at Stephanie as if he had never seen her before. The realization was hitting him like a physical blow. The woman he loved wasn't just high maintenance. She was a con artist, and he had been the mark. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you steal from my mother?" "I didn't steal!" Stephanie shrieked. "I was going to pay it back, once the business took off. And my parents. I just wanted them there." "Is that a crime?" "Fraud is a crime," I said. "Embezzlement is a crime. And right now, the police have all of this evidence." "Police?" Stephanie gasped. She looked at the door, at the guards, at me. The bravado finally collapsed. She burst into tears, ugly, sobbing gasps. "Please, Catherine, don't! I'll pay it back. I promise. Just don't call the police. My life will be over." She fell to her knees, reaching for my hand. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked down at her. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, empty distance. I looked at Justin. He was leaning against the wall, sliding down it as if his legs had given out. He wasn't looking at Stephanie. He was looking at me, tears streaming down his face. "Mom," he choked out. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know." "It doesn't matter," I said softly. "You let her treat me like garbage because you thought it was easier than standing up for me. You watched her kick me out of that venue and you said nothing. That betrayal." "I know," he whispered. "I know." I turned back to Stephanie. "Get up," I said, "and get out, both of you." "But the police?" she whimpered. "That's up to the district attorney now," I said. "Leave, before I have you removed for trespassing." Stephanie scrambled to her feet and ran out the door without looking back. Justin stood up slowly. He looked at me one last time. A look full of regret and shame, and a desperate plea for forgiveness that he knew he hadn't earned. "Goodbye, Mom," he said. "Goodbye, Justin," I replied. He walked out. I closed the door. The latch clicked shut with a finality that echoed in the silence. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and closed my eyes. It was over. The house was quiet. The war was over. But I wasn't done yet. I walked to the kitchen, where the catering bags were waiting. I had one more stop to make. I drove to the charity gala, the back of my SUV filled with boxes of gourmet food and arrangements of white orchids. The venue was a community center, humble but brightly lit, buzzing with the energy of women who were reclaiming their lives. It was the annual fundraiser for Safe Haven, an organization that helps survivors of financial abuse get back on their feet. I carried the first box inside. A woman named Maria, the director, met me at the door. Her eyes widened when she saw the contents. "Catherine? What is all this?" "A donation," I said, setting the box down. "From a cancelled event. I thought you could use it." Maria opened a container of filet mignon skewers. She touched the petal of an orchid. Tears filled her eyes. "Use it? Catherine, we were going to have pizza. This makes it a real gala. This makes these women feel valued." I helped her unload the car. We set up the food on long tables. We placed the orchids in the center of the room. The transformation was instant. The space went from a cafeteria to a banquet hall. When the guests arrived, women with tired eyes but hopeful smiles, some with children clinging to their legs, the room fell silent. They stared at the food, the flowers, the elegance. "Is this for us?" a young woman asked, holding a baby on her hip. "Yes," I said. "It's for you." I watched them eat. I watched them laugh. I watched the tension melt from their shoulders as they were treated to a meal fit for a wedding. The joy in that room was palpable, warm, and real. It was the opposite of the cold, transactional atmosphere of the conservatory. I realized then that my generosity hadn't been the mistake. Giving wasn't the flaw. The flaw was giving to people who felt entitled to it. My money, my effort, my love, it was like water. Pour it on concrete, and it evaporates. Pour it on soil, and it grows. These women, they were the soil. They were the fertile ground where my help could actually take root. I sat in the corner, nursing a glass of sparkling cider, feeling a sense of peace settle over me that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a fool. I was a provider who had finally found the right recipients. Later that night, back in my own home, I walked into my studio. I turned on the desk lamp and pulled out a fresh sheet of drafting paper. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Justin. "Mom, please, can we talk? I'm at a hotel." Stephanie kicked me out when she realized the money was really gone. "I have nowhere to go." I looked at the message. I felt a twinge of the old instinct, the urge to rescue, to fix, to open the door, but then I looked at the blank paper in front of me. I picked up my pencil. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I started to draw. First, the foundation, strong, deep, reinforced. Then the walls, thick, insulated, soundproof. Large windows to let in the light, but with heavy locks to keep out the unwanted. A garden, just for me. A kitchen, designed for cooking meals for friends who said thank you. I was designing a new house. Not for a family that didn't exist, not for a son who wouldn't defend me. For me, Catherine Vance. I drew a line, straight and true. Then another, and another. The blueprint began to take shape under my hand. It was a small house, elegant and self-contained. A fortress of solitude, a monument to self-respect. I smiled, the graphite smudging slightly on my fingertips. I was finally building something that would last. If you were Catherine, would you have pressed charges or just closed the door? Tell me your verdict in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more stories of justice.